Hi everyone, welcome to our latest wine questions video. This week we're going to be talking about oak and wine. So my first question for you, Tom, is what is to oak wine? What do they mean when they say adding oak to wine?
Well, what it means is that oak is an integral part of winemaking. Oak is able to soften tannins, add some flavors, and sort of change a few things with the wine. And that's primarily accomplished by aging a wine in oak, potentially barrel fermenting the oak, or doing a few other little things during winemaking that can impart some of the flavoring of oak.
Okay, so what is the benefit of adding oak to wine then?
Well, in the case of white wines, oak can add things like butterscotch or a bit of spice characteristics. You'll see a lot of oak Chardonnays, primarily out of the United States, that'll have maybe excessive quantities of oak, but that's sort of coming back a little bit. But that's something for another time. And in terms of red wines, it's very good at softening tannins. It can still add some complexity, it can still sort of mature flavors a little bit, but its primary thing is that it helps to integrate some of the flavors during that aging period, but it also tends to soften some of the tannins and, in a very controlled sense, oxidize the wine a little bit. So rather than sort of having these sort of harsh edges in the wine, when you're tasting the wine, some of that oak aging will soften some of those flavors and sort of help them to be a little more rounder in the mouth.
Okay, so if to oak wine means to age wine in a barrel, what are the different types of oak barrels that exist for aging wine?
Well, there's a number of sizes that can be involved in oak aging. So a very small barrel will have a higher ratio of oak to wine and impart more flavor and change the flavors a little bit more radically, as opposed to sort of a larger barrel. But in terms of oak, there's two main types that we'll see, which are being French oak and American oak. Now, American oak is generally will provide a sweeter, richer oak flavor in the wine than French oak, but they'll still provide a very similar flavor. You'll see some things like Slovenian oak. There's some experiments going on with Canadian oak, but those tend to be sort of a distant thirds and fourths to French and American oak.
Okay, and sorry, what are the different, in terms of stylistically, what will the different types of oak do to the wines? Sort of the American and the French that you were speaking about.
Well, they'll still add some of that sort of, it's a flavor sort of very similar to vanilla, which will sometimes be called vanillin. And in terms of, say, white wines, you'll see those butterscotch, and you'll see more of a spicy, buttery note sometimes from the wine that'll be sort of accentuated by some of this oak aging. And American oak will typically just provide kind of maybe a sweeter, richer version of that than French oak, which will be slightly more restrained. One thing to keep in mind is that oak, like any other sort of ingredient, it can go stale over usage. So once you sort of open that package, it will change. But what will happen is a brand new oak barrel will provide a lot of flavor, whereas an older oak barrel will provide much less flavor. And so what will happen in terms of the winemaking is that they'll have a sort of in their barrel programs, they'll talk about things like 20% new oak and 80% old oak barrels, and they'll experiment with different sizes, different manufacturers, and different types of oak, and sort of finding that right balance between some of these sort of sweeter, richer fruits and a slightly more restrained characteristic.
Okay, so are there any other types of barrels or methods for storing wine other than oak barrels?
Oak barrels is the predominant method. There are a few other things that are going on. So you'll see some wines that are stainless steel treated. Generally, that'll be for less expensive wines. And what sometimes they'll do even in that case is they'll add things like oak chips into the tanks, staves, or essentially sometimes you'll see sort of a chemical or liquid smoke or liquid oak sort of added to some of these wines. But they'll still be going for that flavoring. But most wines of quality require some period of time to age to sort of soften up some of those flavors, some of those tannins, and an oak barrel is the best way to do that. Before I sort of rule out other methods, you will see some things like chestnut barrels, sometimes cherry barrels, which generally don't provide a whole lot of flavoring to the wine, but they'll still be a good place for the wine to rest and sort of mature before it's ready to be released.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And that is our introduction to oak and wine. As always, if you have a question about this video or another wine question that you would like to have answered, feel free to get in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter, or by email. See you next week.